Okay, we have 1 minute. It is 10 o'clock. I am going to be starting the webinar.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon or good evening, depending on which part of the world you are in. We are expecting a large number of participants this morning, so I'm just waiting 1 second until we get a critical mass of people in the room. And we will go ahead and get started. So welcome again, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's peer-to-peer webinar for Racial Equity 2030. My name is Talia Gibbous. I am a program officer with CARET, the agency that is supporting Lever for Change and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation for this challenge. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be posted in the forums, as well as on a peer review resource page that we are developing and adding to the Racial Equity 2030 website. We will share the URL of that page with you in the coming days. I want to begin by saying congratulations to all of you. In order to enter this next phase of Racial Equity 2030, you had to submit a completed eligible proposal that seeks to advance racial equity in our world. And now you are part of a broader cohort of organizations, large and small, from around the world that are united in the value of addressing and repairing racial inequities. Having taken a look at the number of your submissions, I can attest to the great range of ideas that have been captured throughout this process, and it is truly inspiring. So we hope that you too will be inspired by participating in this next step. It's no small feat to have taken the time and the care to complete a submission, and thank you again so much for participating. I wanted to let you know how we have allocated our next hour together. First, I will begin with a broad overview of the peer review process, including the rationale behind it and how it fits into the bigger picture of this challenge. Then Jenna Shornack of Lever for Change will provide additional guidance regarding the context of the proposals you will be reviewing and some key things to keep in mind as you complete your reviews. She will also share a brief video on implicit bias, which will be very important for you to remain aware of as you go through this process. Then my colleague Ethan Matthews will provide a technical demonstration of the platform you will use to complete your reviews, and then we'll open things up for your questions. So please type your questions into the Q&A tab and we'll answer as many as we can. We'll also be typing responses to your questions throughout our time together. Please note, if you are joining us via YouTube, you will not have the option to ask questions live, but please email us at questions@racialequity2030.org if you have outstanding questions after the session. Okay, so now I will provide a quick overview of how peer-to-peer review fits into the broader context of Racial Equity 2030. We all know that too many people's futures are bound by the color of their skin or their family circumstances or the limits of opportunity because of systemic inequities in our communities. As you know, Racial Equity 2030 is a call to answer that challenge. And you all did that by completing and submitting a proposal. We then completed the first step of review, and that is known as administrative review, in order to confirm that your proposals met the eligibility criteria and are broadly aligned with the W.K. Kellogg Foundation's goals for this challenge. So congratulations again for having passed administrative review. This next step is for all eligible applicants to read and provide feedback on 5 other submissions using the scoring rubric. Peer review is a unique feature of this challenge that aligns with a broader goal of ensuring that the process of applying to Racial Equity 2030 has value to all. We know this is an additional request of your time, and it ensures a number of things. Number 1, it ensures that all participants receive feedback on their ideas from diverse perspectives, from people who are working towards a similar vision. Number 2, it also exposes each participant to 5 other organizations who are working to achieve the same goal. We know that participants in past rounds of peer review have gone on to reach out to each other after peer review is complete and after the challenge, and found ways to collaborate. Number 3, given the very broad scope of this challenge, it allows participants to learn about different efforts to address racial equity in different contexts. This challenge has garnered participation from more than 70 countries around the world, which is really an invaluable opportunity for exchange and learning. So here's how peer-to-peer works. You each have been assigned 5 other applications, which you will see when you log into the platform. And those assignments were made randomly. In the event that you have a conflict of interest with one of the applications you were assigned, please email questions@racialequity2030.org with the applicant name and number as soon as possible, and we will replace that conflict with a new application for you to review. Between now and the peer review deadline, which is Monday, April 26th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, you will read and provide feedback on those submissions. We have given you several weeks to complete them in order to allow you adequate time to review each proposal in full and provide thoughtful feedback. Now, we've already received a number of questions about who should be completing these reviews, so I wanted to clarify that. We know that many of you applied as teams. So in order to complete this process, you have a few options. The preferred option is to select one team member who has deep understanding of and experience with your proposed solution and who can lend an on-the-ground perspective in providing feedback. In this option, that person will complete all of the assigned reviews. And to do that, this individual will need the same login credentials that were used to submit your application. However, depending on your team's situation or preferences, we understand that it might not be feasible for one person to complete all the reviews, or you may simply prefer to review them as a team, and that is fine. You will need to coordinate because the system will not allow multiple logins in the same registration simultaneously, so you'll need to make sure that only one person is logged in at a time. You will also need to review the scores and comments before you submit for consistency. Really, the key things that we want you to keep in mind with this is that the person or people completing the reviews should have an understanding of your own proposed solution, should have an interest in learning about the ideas put forth by others, and should also have the capacity to complete the reviews thoroughly. As with the application, the reviews must be completed in English. So once you've completed your 5 required reviews, you will see additional reviews pop up into your queue. And so this can cause some confusion, so I want to try to be as clear as I can. Those additional reviews that pop up after the first 5 are optional before Monday, April 26th. If time allows, we encourage you and you are welcome to complete those optional reviews. What completing these optional reviews does is it helps to reduce the number of reviews that we might need to reassign on April 27th. But again, it is not required. Only the first 5 are required between now and April 26th. Once that deadline has passed on Monday, April 26th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, we will notify you via email if there are any additional required reviews that you will need to submit. If there are required additional reviews assigned to you, they will be due on Thursday, April 29th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. You will also be notified if there are no additional reviews assigned to you at that time. Please note that if you do not meet that April 26th deadline to complete the 5 required initial reviews, or if you do not meet the April 29th deadline to complete the additional reviews that may be assigned to you, your application will not be eligible to move forward to future phases of the challenge. Once peer review is complete, all scores will be normalized for fairness and to account for easier and tougher reviewers. There is a page on our website, A Level Playing Field, that has a lot more detail on this normalization process, so we encourage you to take a look at that. In addition, the scores and feedbacks that you provide will be anonymously shared with your fellow applicants after peer review is complete. And we know from surveys of past challenges that this feedback is extremely helpful. So please help us continue that trend by being thorough and constructive in your feedback, the same way that you would hope that others be with comments that they give you. Based on the rank order of submissions provided by peer reviews, a subset of applications will move to the next phase of review, which is the expert review panel. In that phase, your application will be reviewed and scored again by 5 expert reviewers, and you can see the full roster of expert reviewers on our website. So that's a quick overview of the process, and I'm now very happy to turn things over to Jenna Shornack of Lever for Change, who will provide some more guidance for things to keep in mind as you dive into this process.
Thank you, Talia. Hi, everyone. My name is Jenna Shornack. I am the awards director at Lever for Change. I am proud to say we are now on our 10th challenge at Lever for Change. So we do have some feedback and learnings about peer review from applicants from all those other challenges, and I would like to share more with you today. I will offer some broad guidance on scoring specific to the Racial Equity 2030 challenge as well. But first, we would like to address implicit biases. Our partners at Chicago Beyond have created a short video about recognizing biases when reviewing applications. We will now hear from Liz Dozier to explain more.
When it comes to making a decision around who to fund, judges should bring their individual perspective with the decision. I mean, that's a must, that's why they're judges. But the question is, what of our own perspective as judges are we intending to bring? And that serves making a really good decision for investing in work with transformative impact versus what we are unconsciously bringing to the table that might actually cut against making a difference on a significant problem of our time. Let's dig in. Let me give you a few examples. Beauty bias. This is one I'm sure we can all relate to. It's where we associate beauty with success, like physical beauty, but also in like writing styles, spelling, and grammar. So as a judge, I might subconsciously react to how the first paragraph of an application is written. And before even really reading through the entire application, make a judgment about how that applicant team might be able to execute or not execute. I might end up, for example, giving higher scores for really excellent grammar in the English language, which at the end of the day might not be the best proxy for the ability to think and do differently. For example, standard English language is really shaped by white dominant culture. And so if I'm prioritizing as a judge excellent standard English language, what does that say about my judgment? What does it say about really understanding our time and how to bring about solutions? So let me be very clear. The point is not that a truly transformative application or a truly community-led application will either have exquisite standard English language or patchy grammar. The point is being aware of my assumptions, connecting the beauty of an application with the impact and the durability of the actual work. Affinity bias. When something reminds us of something we know and like, we have a greater warmth, a greater connection. We just pay more attention. For example, we can't understand certain ideas because we can't relate to them in a cultural context. So as a judge, I might subconsciously have an affinity for science-based applications or for large-scale quantitative evidence. This, as a judge, may cause me to unintentionally disfavor applicants who have a lot of experience working with harder to serve and harder to research populations. So the question to ask ourselves as judges is simply this: When I'm assessing the impact of an application, is my judgment drawing on how much it reminds me of some concept or some institution or some evidence elsewhere that I like or perhaps that I dislike? This isn't about bad people who are biased and good people who are not biased. We all have bias. Neuroscience shows us it's built into our human brains. We couldn't get out of bed in the morning and function if we were constantly reevaluating every single decision every day. But when we're actively trying to invest in work that is truly ambitious, then importing our biases and whether X investment looks like Y investment we've seen before could actually get in our way of making the right decision. Let me share a few more types of bias to be aware of. Halo bias. Here's the simple definition. It's when we identify one great thing in an application and let the halo, the pure glow of that affect our opinions of everything else in that application. And it can work the opposite way as well. The halo can actually be horns. For example, as a judge, I might see that a particular member of an applicant team attended a certain school, and I might subconsciously conclude that the entire application is stronger and more feasible. But the real question is whether the knowledge required to do the work is really learned in a classroom. Do better schools set us up to do better work with particular populations? Does a higher class of education bring people together in ways necessary for transformative change to happen? For example, typical education credentials are going to be less able to measure the act of bringing community together. There is no class out there, that I know of at least, that teaches about the dynamics in a particular community. The best applicants may have a lot of formal education, or perhaps a little. But we have been trained to associate education credentials with potential to succeed. It's part of our bias. As a judge, I might see evidence from a certain university and subconsciously conclude that the application is more evidence-based. But only certain types of work have access to university researchers. Only certain types of work connect to data in big administrative databases, and vulnerable populations are less likely to be fully counted in data sets because of how the production of evidence actually works. Confirmation bias. Now, this is when we subconsciously look for evidence to back up our own opinions. These opinions may be coming from a subconscious desire to conform within the opinion of the group we're a part of. Confirmation bias is also called my side bias because it's a tendency for us as human beings to search out and favor information that confirms my side, what I already believe to be true. If I already believe women are bad drivers and I see a bad driver who happens to be a woman, this backs up my completely archaic belief that all women are bad drivers. As a judge, I might also believe a certain narrative about particular communities or populations, and I might subconsciously favor applications, find them to be more feasible if they confirm my narrative, and disfavor applications that challenge it. Contrast bias. That's when we compare something we see in an application to another organization or a context that we're familiar with. Subconsciously, we're defining a comparison point that might not be appropriate. So as a judge, I might subconsciously be evaluating the impact of smaller groups versus larger groups. I may be pitting one application led by multiple smaller organizations against the ability of a larger institution to articulate its impact in an entirely different context. By pausing and bringing that implicit judgment into my conscious focus, I can evaluate whether the comparison is appropriate or whether I'm unintentionally judging things that look different than what I've seen before to be less feasible or less durable. In the end, recognizing bias is all about noticing. It's about noticing how, as a judge, we're evaluating applications. What's in the back of our mind? It's so critical that we're deliberate and vigilant to set aside our bias so that we're able to truly see the impact that awaits.
Thanks, everyone. We will share a link to that video in the applicant portal and in follow-up materials. Watching this video is required before you start the peer review process. So if there is a member of your team that will be doing peer reviews but is not on this webinar, please make sure they have access to this video. Now, some more about scoring. You have been randomly assigned your applications to review. However, we recognize you might not be a specialist on the specific area of each application you've been assigned. Please remember, this was an intentionally open challenge, and we received applications from all over the world representing various types of organizations, approaches, and mindsets for thinking about this work. We see this as an opportunity to learn from and explore other bold solutions to an equitable future. And as a reminder, why the term racial equity has specific connotations within the United States, in a global context, this challenge seeks to advance equity within hierarchies, structures, policies, systems, and practices of dehumanization that perpetuate disparities for racial and ethnic groups in a local context. We believe a racially equitable society is one in which neither race nor ethnicity determines opportunity in life outcomes. It is a society where all groups have the ability to participate, prosper, and reach their full potential. Depending on the local conditions named in the application you're reviewing, barriers to that vision may be rooted in perceived racial differences and or oppression tied to ethnicity, caste, or economic injustice. Further, given the global nature of this challenge, applications were required to be submitted in English, and we also ask that your reviews are in English. We acknowledge and understand the barrier this places on those who English is not their first language, and we ask you to keep this in mind when reviewing your assigned applications. English was chosen to provide a consistency across all entries and reduce the risk of translation error or misinterpreting an application. However, we know even within the English language, there are differences in terminology, phrasing, and perspective. Next, we ask that you please be professional and kind in giving your feedback. Remember, applicants are just like you and have given their best efforts, so please be generous and constructive. Applicants will receive your scores and comments, although your name will not be attached. As I said earlier, we are now on our 10th challenge at Lever for Change, and we have observed that the norm in peer review is fellow applicants score honestly and provide constructive, fair feedback. Further, we survey all applicants after the competitions, and they also say they find their scores were overwhelmingly helpful and constructive. We ask that you help us keep this trend going as a participant in Racial Equity 2030. Also, in that same line of thinking, feel free to also point out the strengths of the application in addition to areas of growth. Keep in mind that the application had word counts, so answers may be brief, budgets were meant to be overviews, and we also asked applicants to avoid using jargon. As you dive into your reviews, we urge you to pay close attention to the scoring rubric and criteria outlined on Racial Equity 2030 website. I will share some key considerations for each category now. The first criteria is game-changing. Some considerations for how to assess if a proposal is game-changing could be, what is the overall impact of the solution proposed? Please note there's no expectation that a proposed solution have global impact, but rather think about what the impact or shift is for the specific community, system, institution, or group of people. You might want to consider, will the impact of the solution be transformational, or will it reinforce or continue the status quo? We know systems can take many years to fully transform or rebuild, but the solution should be on a pathway towards transformational change, and outcomes should not be incremental. And finally, does the solution reflect a deep understanding of current conditions and systems, and has the applicant identified key leverage points in changing those systems? The next category is equitable. We really want to emphasize that equity does not mean the solution will benefit all types of people everywhere. Some key questions to ask are, is the proposal addressing the root causes of racialized outcomes, Or is the solution only tackling the impacts of racialized systems and upholding the status quo? Is the impacted community part of decision-making and defining success? Is the project led by people with lived experience related to that solution? And does the solution take an asset-based approach? Our definition of asset-based as it pertains to racial equity is a solution that is focused on strengths. Solutions are defined and driven by the community, and beneficiaries are valued for what they contribute versus what they lack. And finally, does the applicant's proposed solution embrace and reflect commitments to racial equity, racial healing, community engagement, and leadership? The next category is bold. Some considerations for this are, does the solution feature ideas, approaches, structures, or outcomes that are imaginative or catalytic? Please keep in mind, imaginative does not necessarily mean inventing a new technology tool or a brand new concept. Imaginative or catalytic ideas could be something to do with how to maintain a sustainable organization, or could be about testing or experimenting, taking risks, a revolutionary new vision, or it could be a novel partnership or expansion of tried and true ideas that catalyze better and bolder outcomes. It does not need to be all of these things. We are looking for outcomes that are bold, aspirational, and can be sustained over time. And finally, the last category is actionable. We are calling for bold ideas, but we are also trying to understand if the ideas are attainable. This is where we want you to look at the plan, the team, the activities, and ask yourself, does this make sense? Is this realistic? We want to emphasize that early stage ideas and newly formed teams can still score high on the actionable criteria. Experience can come in many forms. It could be lived experience. It could look like someone who has done this work for many years, or it could be someone who has skills from prior experiences that they are transferring to a new project. You may also consider if the team is thinking about strategic partnerships to fill any gaps or skills and capacities. You might also be looking to see if the applicant provides evidence that the solution will be successful. Again, we want to emphasize that we are asking applicants in the impacted community how they define success. And we also want to emphasize there could be all different types of evidence that can support the solution being successful. These can be formal or informal studies, observations, and other indicators of change as defined by the community. Oftentimes in grant making, one type of evidence is preferred over others, and we encourage you to be open to all these various types of evidence. Please also remember that each finalist will receive the $1 million planning grant and many months of support for revising their plans and preparing to implement the solution. One final point, for each scoring criteria, we encourage you to assess the entire application. In other words, there's not one question or one section of the application that perfectly aligns to the 4 scoring criteria. I will now hand it off to Ethan Matthews and look forward to answering any questions you have at the end of the webinar.
Thank you, Jenna. I'm going to go ahead and take us into the back end of the system where you guys have put your applications in and submitted. Normally you'd be on the website here and click on Login, and it'll take you to the back end and to the dashboard, which looks like this. And this is a test environment, so please note it'll look a little bit different than what you see in your peer review. But you'll click on peer review there. And then I'm going to go here. This is a queue of reviews. Do note there's a video tutorial right here that you can go ahead and watch. It's about 2 minutes or so. It gives an overview of what I'm going through right now. You can always email us questions@racialequity2030.org if you have any issues completing your reviews. So there's 2 tabs here. One is the open reviews and one is completed reviews. When you complete a review, it will go to this tab, and you can edit that review up until the reviewing deadline. So if you need to get back in and change something, or you have a second thought about something, you can get back in there and edit before that initial peer review period deadline. I'm going to go ahead here and open a new review completely from the top. I'm going to click Start Review. And once I'm in here, I'm going to have a registration form that I'm going to click on, and also the application form. Exactly what you all submitted when you submitted your proposals. Hold these open as you're going to use them as you go through the reviewing process. And next, I'm in the rubric, and this is the same scoring rubrics that we just visited with Jenna on the front end of the website, but this version of it allows you to actually enter answers and score a proposal. So it has the 4 different traits along the top here: game-changing, equitable, bold, and actionable. And then you can move the slider to go ahead and select your selection for this particular trait. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and enter your feedback in the bottom. And remember that, there's a minimum of 10 words for feedback, but please, be judicious and give as much feedback as you can per trait. Once I'm done with that, I can go ahead and click next, and it's going to take me to equitable. I can go ahead and create my selection again, and then leave feedback, and I can hit next. And this is constantly saving my selections as I go through. And now I'm on actionable, the final trait. I'm going to hit next, and this will take me to an overall impression score. Go ahead and leave your overall impression for the overall proposal, and click next, and then you get a summary screen, and you can get back to any of the traits right here if you need to redo something. And note that you can click save and exit at any time, and it'll save where you are in this particular review, and you can get back to it. So once I get to the end here, I click save and exit, and I just say complete. And now that particular review is moved to the completed reviews tab. So that's a good little short tutorial. Again, you can view this one up here, this video tutorial, if you need to. And please, if you have any questions at all, email us at questions@racialequity2030.org. I do want to mention, too, that if you have any kind of technical difficulties, one of the best things to do if you're not already using it is to switch to Google Chrome. The platform works best on Chrome. It will work on other web browsers just fine, but if you do have initial difficulties at all, you might consider switching to Chrome. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Talia and the Lever for Change team. We're going to answer some questions.
Thank you so much, Ethan. Very much appreciate it. And now I'm pleased to introduce my colleague, Jenny Adams, who will help get your questions answered.
Thank you, Talia. Hello, everyone. We are now in the Q&A portion of the webinar. I will read questions aloud, and my colleagues will answer verbally. We will get through as many as we can in the next half an hour or so, and we will go ahead and jump in. First question. There were several team members involved in developing our application who all have deep understanding of and experience with our proposed solution. Is it possible to assign more than one person to support with reviews?
This is Talia. So I talked a little bit about this at the beginning, but the preferred option is to have one person complete all reviews, but we completely recognize this is not always possible. So if you do have several people completing, you will just need to do a few things. First and foremost, you need to coordinate your logins because the platform will only allow one person to be logged in at a time. And then also, please review the final scores and feedback in aggregate before submitting for consistency.
Next question. Is it possible to know how many applications you received and how many are moving forward to the next stage of peer review?
This is Jenna. I can take this one. The number of applications that did not meet eligibility was quite small. So we do not share the additional details on application numbers, but as you might imagine, given the nature and relative openness of the challenge, the response was quite robust. So we hope you consider yourself in good company with many other peers working towards similar goals.
Next question. My team found WKKF's step-by-step evaluation guide very helpful in putting together the proposal. Should we be referring to it during peer review?
This is Talia. We're very happy that you found that resource helpful. However, it is not meant to be referred to during peer review. So please just focus your comments and feedback on the extent to which the application meets the criteria in the scoring rubric, keeping in mind all of the considerations that Jenna mentioned earlier.
Next question. One of my assigned applications appears to be from an organization that is very small. A lot of the terms in the scoring rubric refer to transformational change. How should I reconcile the bold terms of the scoring rubric with the fact that this organization appears to only have 2 or 3 people?
Great question. So organizations of all types and sizes were eligible to participate in Racial Equity 2030. The scoring rubric is focused on boldness and potential for transformation within the proposed solution, not necessarily the organization or organizations putting the idea forward. So if you feel like the idea itself is game-changing, bold, etc., then please say so. The actionable criteria gets more into the team's capacity to implement the solution. So hopefully the application makes the case that the team has the skills, capacity, plans, knowledge, or lived experience to implement the proposed strategy with a $20 million investment, or talks about their plans for doing so. If it does not make that case, or if you have questions about their overall plan, you should take that into account in your score and feedback comments. Remember that this proposal is not a fully fleshed out plan, so you should not expect all details to be fully explained. However, you should get a broad sense of what is being proposed and why the team thinks it will work. But an organization size or relative youth does not necessarily count against it.
Next question. How do you know people are not going to try and rig the system by giving low scores to other applications? Isn't there an incentive to score others harshly to try and get ahead?
This is Talia. No, there is not an incentive. This is an opportunity to provide respectful feedback to other people who are working toward a similar goal as you are. So a few things here. As we mentioned previously, we know from surveys of past participants that the feedback they received from colleagues during peer review is very helpful. And the norm is for all people to be participating in this process in good faith and really providing respectful and constructive feedback to others. So we ask that you continue that trend by being thoughtful and thorough. And also, as I mentioned earlier, as a reminder, all of the scores are normalized. So if you are, for example, a harsher grader, then that is taken into account and the scores are readjusted. So we have no evidence to show that people are purposefully rigging the system to bring other scores down. The norm is very much that applicants are generous and fair in that in their scoring. And again, that normalization process helps to ensure that as well.
Next question. One of the proposals I have read focuses on a specific region that is fairly racially homogeneous. It does not work with individuals of all races. Does that mean I should score it lower on the equitable criterion?
No. The equitable criterion asks about whether the proposal addresses the root causes of racialized outcomes and inequitable systems within that specific context. So depending on that context, not all races or ethnicities may be focused on in their solution. So equitable in this context means that the proposal compellingly addresses the root causes of racialized outcomes and inequitable systems. It has an asset-based approach and acknowledges the historical inequities that sets a path forward towards a just future. And they've included impacted communities in decision-making positions, and they're taking the lead in defining what success looks like. So all of this is laid out in the scoring range definitions on the rubric itself. I encourage you to look at those key questions as you give the equitable score.
Next question. How much time do you calculate for one review?
This is Talia. So on average, past surveys indicate that each review takes between 45 minutes and 1 hour to complete, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. So you should expect roughly to allocate between 4 and 5 hours total during the peer review period.
Next question. We, as applicants, don't appreciate as much as you, the funder, what you are truly looking for in a finalist, even though we have all reviewed the criteria. If the applicant pool peers get it wrong, is there a corrective mechanism built into this approach?
Great question. A couple of points here. So one is that an important part of this challenge is its openness and transparency about what the challenge sponsor, who's WK Kellogg Foundation, is looking for. This is why we share the scoring rubric and criteria ahead of time, and it's the same rubric used by all reviewers, and it does not change throughout the challenge. It also, going back to the openness, part of this competition is that we are open to lots of different ideas and open to hearing your perspectives on those ideas. So there's not one specific project or type of project that the WK Kellogg Foundation is looking for beyond what's provided on the website and through the scoring criteria. However, we know that there is still some subjectiveness built into applying that criteria, which is why your proposal will be reviewed by at least 5 other applicants, and your scores are normalized in the process that Talia just talked about. And then there is another layer of review where top scoring proposals will go through later by a panel of expert reviewers, where the proposals will be reviewed again by at least 5 reviewers. So we are hopeful that this multi-step process helps give us a lot of information about which proposals rise to the top.
Next question. Can you adjust your proposal in any way if there are questions that need to be clarified?
This is Talia. You are not able to adjust your proposal at this time. However, if you do move on to further stages of the challenge and are named a finalist, you will have about 8 months to revise and submit a more comprehensive proposal. And bear in mind that you will have also received peer review feedback by that point, so you can take that into account as you're making any necessary adjustments.
Next question. How many people or organizations are evaluating each proposal?
Each proposal will be reviewed by at least 5 reviewers. And then if your application moves on to the expert review panel phase, then that proposal will then receive 5 additional reviews.
Next question. Is there a definition for conflict of interest?
Yes, so a conflict of interest would mean that you or your team members have an association with the proposed solution. There are pre-existing relationships that render you unable to evaluate the proposal objectively. So if you have a conflict of interest, please email questions@racialequity2030.org and let us know the applicant's name and number of the proposal that you have a conflict with, and we will replace that with a new application for you to review. It does help us if you let us know as soon as possible. So if you have not already logged in and taken a look at the applications that are in your queue, please do that and then reach out if anything needs to be swapped out.
Next question. Will we be assigned applications that share common features such as populations or approaches?
No, so the assignments are made randomly.
Next question. How will intellectual property be protected as part of this process?
This is Jenna. So neither peer nor expert reviewers are bound by a non-disclosure or confidentiality agreement in this process. So all the information in your application will move through several rounds of review. And we advise during the application process that you do not put any information in the application that you would not feel comfortable sharing in that manner.
Next question, quotes a statement. Review scores and comments before submission for consistency, end quote. Does this mean all team members would review each other's comments and scores?
So this is Talia. So yes, it can mean that. Other teams have also assigned one individual who is a member of that team to go through and take a look at the scores and comments together. Either is fine. Again, you're just looking to make sure that there is consistency between the reviews if you have different people who have been participating.
Next question. How many team members need to log in to conduct the reviews? Can one member log in and the rest of the team weigh in on the review instead of everyone logging in?
This is Talia again. Yes, absolutely. So to reiterate, the platform will only allow one login at a time. So if you have one person completing all reviews or you'll be working as a team, there can only be one login at a time. If you don't do that, the platform will actually kick you out if you have more than one person logged in. Yes, absolutely, you want one person to log in and then weigh in on the reviews, or you can have different people logging in at different times. You just can't have more than one person logged in at the same time.
Next question. We aren't part of a consortium, but are other members of our internal team allowed to review, or is it meant to be the project lead?
Yes, you are welcome to include members of your team, but I think our first preference is that one person really leads the process and submits the reviews, but you are certainly allowed to include members of your team in the review process.
Next question is similar. Can we engage members from the communities we are collaborating with, global youth leaders, for example, to review the proposals as part of a team process?
That's a great idea. We really appreciate engaging members of your community or youth leaders in your case. I think for the peer review process, we prefer that you keep it within your team that submitted the application, just because there's some standardized thinking and understanding about the challenge and the criteria and scoring rubric. But we can certainly see a scenario where you share some of the great ideas that you found in peer review with community or team members, and we are hopeful that you engage them in the development of your proposal too.
Next question, clarifying question. So there are 5 required reviews, but there may be more that become required that would be assigned on the 26th. So maybe Talia, you can walk through that process one more time.
Yes, no problem. I understand this can be a little bit confusing. So yes, between now and the April 26th deadline, you are required to submit 5 reviews. Once you complete those 5 reviews, you will see additional reviews pop into your queue. If you have the capacity, the interest, and the inclination to complete more than 5, we welcome and encourage you to do that, because that will help to cut down on the number of submissions that might need to be reassigned after the April 26th deadline. After the April 26th deadline, if there are applications that have been reassigned to you that needed to be redistributed, you will be notified via email, and then you will have until Thursday, the 29th at 5 p.m. Eastern to complete them. And we will also let you know if there are no additional assignments for you to complete. You will receive that notification as well. Really, the key thing to keep in mind is you must complete 5 between now and April 26th, and on April 27th, you will be notified in the event that there are more that you need to complete.
Next question, how many applications go on to the expert panel? Is it dependent on the peer review? And if so, what are the criteria? Will we get the comments on our proposals regardless of whether we move forward or not?
I can take this one. So yes, everyone will get, if you participate in peer review, you will receive the comments from your fellow applicants that reviewed your application. Their names will not be part of those reviews, but you will get the scores and all the comments at a later date. In deciding how many applications go on to the expert review panel, we look at the scores, we look at the distribution of scores, and where there is a natural cutoff point in the quality of applications. And so top scoring applications, we do not have an exact number at this time,
we really look at the distribution of scores, we'll move on to the expert review panel.
Next question on similar topic. How does peer review factor into overall submission scoring? The selection committee section of the website indicates considerations including rank from expert review panel, but does not mention the peer review process.
Great question. So the ranking from the peer review process, as I said before, we look at the distribution of scores in the ranking, and that will determine if you move on to the expert review panel. The expert review panel do not see your peer review score, so everyone starts back even again. However, the selection committee will look at the top ranked scores from the expert review panel and also take into account the peer review scores and rankings. And the commentary from and feedback from your peer reviews is really helpful in the selection committee consideration of finalists. So all of that information is taken into account in the selection of 10 finalists.
Next question. If in the course of reviewing another proposal, we find that another applicant would make an amazing partner because their proposal is so aligned with ours, is there any way to ask WK Kellogg consider funding us jointly, as in asking that WK Kellogg ask us for a joint proposal?
That's a great question. So a couple of things here. At this point, we will just be considering your proposal as written. There's not an opportunity to adjust until you might be named a finalist. I think if you are named a finalist, one of the key strategic questions we will be working with you on is if there are other partners that you should be joining forces with or people you should be engaging in your work. And so that would be a really great opportunity to bring a partner that you discovered through peer review on board. With all of that said, we are hopeful that you might find a partner just generally to connect with. And if that's the case, you should feel free to reach out to them directly or contact us, let us know that you want to connect with them, and we would be happy to provide some contact information so you can connect. As we said in the past, we've heard from applicants that discover great partners doing similar work or someone that they want to connect with and learn more from, and they do so. So we consider that a really great benefit of participating in this process.
Next question. Are we required or encouraged to touch base with organizations whose proposals we are reviewing?
This is Talia. No, you are not required or encouraged to reach out to the organization. The intention is to really focus your review on the information that is provided on the application. So you should not be reaching out to the organization. There is no need to visit their website or click on any links that they may have, any URLs that they may have provided. So really the request is that you focus the scores and the feedback just on the information that is provided in the application.
Next question. Regarding reaching out to potential collaborators, is there a certain amount of time that should pass before doing so? Is it appropriate to identify ourselves as a peer reviewer if the feedback is meant to be anonymous?
So this is Talia again. You definitely want to wait until after the peer review process is complete. And you can actually email us once that is over if you want to reach out, and we can provide further guidance on how to do that. So if you have folks that you want to reach out to, just please wait until after peer review and then send us an email, and we will be happy to direct you regarding next steps.
Next question. Which aspects of the proposal are subjected to the peer review process?
So this is Talia again. Almost the entire application that you submitted has moved on to peer review. So you might remember on the application itself, there were specific fields that were marked as being visible to peer and expert reviewers, and others that were marked as not visible. The vast majority were marked as visible. So again, the vast majority of the application is part of this process, including things like the video and most of the narrative sections. If you, I'll also add that if you are unsure of which of those fields are not included in peer review, you can go to the application page of the website on racialequity2030.org, and you will see that each section is marked appropriately.
We have about 5 minutes left in the webinar, so we'll do a couple more questions. Will how we evaluate other projects impact our own application? Does the quality of reviews of other applications impact whether one's own application moves to the next stage?
I can take this one. So your reviews are independent of your received reviews, and if you move on to the next stage of the challenge, with the exception of completing the reviews. So we ask that you fully complete all of your reviews with thorough and fair commentary and scores. If you fail to do so, you will not move on to the next stage of the challenge.
Next question. Do you recommend reading all 5 proposals first and then starting scoring, or to score each proposal without considering the other 4?
I can take this one. So we encourage you to read your 5 proposals and score them independently of each other. Sometimes comparing the proposals is an unfair, there's an unfair distribution of you might have received 5 really exceptional proposals or 5 lower scoring proposals. So we really want you to apply the scoring rubric independently to each proposal. There are different approaches for going about doing your reviews, and some people do read them all and then go back and score, but I think our key takeaway is that you should review them all independently of each other and not in a comparative nature.
Next question. I know you can only be logged in on one screen, but is there a way to open the scoring in a new window so you can toggle back and forth between the application and where you score?
This is Talia. Yes. So when you log in, the application and the registration form will actually open in a new tab. So you will be able to switch back and forth between the tabs, with one tab being the actual rubric and the other being the actual application, so that you can read in one screen and then enter your comments in the other. Ethan did demonstrate that during the his demonstration of the platform. And again, if you're just having technical trouble or have questions about this, you can always email us at questions@racialequity2030.org.
Next question. In our review, should we consider whether or not an application needs the financial support? For example, if an applicant mentions having access to a lot of outside funding, should that be considered in our review?
Great question. That consideration is not part of the scoring rubric, so I would not consider whether or not they have access to financial support as part of your score.
Next question. Have the proposals been assigned already?
This is Talia. Yes, they have. If you log into your into the portal, you will see the 5 submissions that are assigned to you. If you have not done so already, we really encourage you to do that as soon as possible, to check for any potential conflicts of interest, and also to make sure that everything seems to be working properly, and that you don't have any technical questions.
Great, and I think final question here. Is there a word count limit for the feedback?
This is Talia. I know that there is a minimum number of words that need to be entered. I actually don't know off the top of my head what the far end limit is, so we can follow up via email about that one. You are encouraged to be thorough and constructive in your feedback. Oh, I actually just see a message right here. There is no limit. Thank you for clarifying. There is no limit, no top end limit on the word count in the platform, but there is a minimum limit of 10 words. So please be thorough, and again, please be constructive as you enter in that information. And with that, we have reached to the end of our time for your questions. So thank you to everyone for submitting such thoughtful questions. Thanks to the team for helping get them answered. We did get to as many as we could. So just a few quick reminders as we close out. We will be sharing a recording of this webinar, as well as the URL of a peer review resource page that will include a list of frequently asked questions, as well as a link to the implicit bias video that we shared earlier. That will be coming to you in the coming days. As Jenna mentioned, that implicit bias video is required watching for whoever is completing the reviews in your team. So you can either send them the link directly or just have them watch this training video and they will get it that way. The deadline to complete your 5 required reviews is Monday, April 26th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Please, please, please budget your time appropriately so that you can complete your reviews with care. And again, you will be notified on Tuesday, April 27th if there are additional reviews that are assigned to you, or if you're all done at that point, you will be notified either way. If you have questions, you can always reach us at questions@racialequity2030.org. And with that, back to Jenna for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Talia. On behalf of the WK Kellogg Foundation, Carrot, and Lever for Change, thank you so much for joining us today and for participating in this challenge. As we said, we are just thrilled with the response and the applications you submitted, and we are so excited for you now to all engage with each other's applications and these bold ideas. So please continue to reach out if you have questions, and we really look forward to hearing your feedback. Thank you and have a great day.